Good evening and welcome to the TRHT Selma Candidate Forum 2022. We're delighted you have chosen to join us for this candidate forum. My name is Lydia Chapman and I serve as the director for TRHT Selma. TRHT stands for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. In Selma, this initiative exists in partnership between the Selma Center for Nonviolence and the Black Belt Community Foundation. Tonight's presentation is an opportunity for you, the voter, to hear from candidates in two races, District Attorney for District 4 and the Dallas County Sheriff. As a part of our effort to inform voters, questions were submitted from the community through our law, economy, and separation design teams. Of the four candidates, three chose to submit written responses to the community-focused questions, while one, our current district attorney, decided not to respond. Their written responses were published in the Selma Sun newspaper, with the responses of the sheriff's candidates being published last week, and the responses from the one DA candidate who chose to participate being printed in today's issue of the Selma Sun. Of the three who chose to submit responses to the community in print, only two have chosen to face you, the voters, in a live, community-based, community-focused question and answer session. Our first candidate is running to become the district attorney to serve District 4, Mr. Robert Turner Jr. Our moderator for this dynamic conversation is none other than Mr. Eric Nettles. We appreciate both of you gentlemen for being here with us. We are excited to hear what you have to say. And if you, the viewer, have any questions, you are invited to submit them in the comment section. Your question may just get selected to be asked of the candidate. Again, we welcome you, encourage you to sit back, relax, and let's enjoy a great conversation between these two awesome men. Mr. Nettles, take it away.
Thank you so much, Lydia. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eric M. Nettles Sr., and I bring you greetings from Montgomery, Alabama. How are you, Mr. Robert Turner?
I am well. It's
Thank
a
you so
pleasure to
much,
be
sir. Um, I would like to first start out by just putting a little ground rules because a lot of people don't know what your role is. So we want to start out and kind of build from that, if that's okay with you.
here. That is fine.
Okay.
I am seeking the position of the district attorney for the Fourth Judicial Circuit of Alabama.
Okay.
Basically, what that refers to is the counties of Bibb County, Dallas, Hale, Perry, and Wilcox.
Yes.
We are a bunch of rural counties that have a lot of things in common. And what the state of Alabama saw fit to do some years ago is to lump us into one judicial circuit so that all of those counties basically fall under three circuit judges and one district attorney. And the district attorney has the primary responsibility of being the chief law enforcement officer for those counties and is in charge of prosecuting um, all criminal cases and defending the victims within those counties. The office does allow for assistant district attorneys to work with us as well as multiple staff that act as
Okay.
support and as service to the community as a whole.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. With that being said, what counties are included in District 4?
Okay. The northernmost county is Bibb, and then in addition to Bibb County, there is Dallas County, which is our largest county, Hale County, which encompasses Greensboro, Fonsdale, Moundville, areas of New Bern, Havana, Sawyerville. And we've got Perry County, which is my
Okay.
home county.
Oh, that's your
Perry
home.
is
Okay.
Perry County, Marion, Uniontown, Sprott, Harburger, the other parts of New Bern, and a couple of other areas. Then we also have Wilcox County, which is the southernmost county in this circuit.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that great answer, sir. With that being said, also, where did you develop such a passion for law?
I am a second generation lawyer. My
Okay.
father, Robert Turner Sr., is also a practicing attorney, and the two of
Okay.
us work in a firm together, the Turner and Turner firm. And I watched him as a kid, me being the oldest of four children, born to my parents. I used to be the kid that tagged along with him to not just sporting events. Both of us are avid sports fans as well. But I tagged along with him when he began his law practice in Selma. His first job was in Selma, actually, with the Chestnut Sanders and Sanders firm at that time. And then he also ended up being the first Black municipal judge in the city of Selma in the
Okay.
early 80s. So I basically was born with a football under my arm, a basketball, baseball
And a
bat,
law
but
book.
also a law book. So where it started. And he didn't push me into law. Uh, there are four of us. I'm the only one that chose to follow into the legal field. But I just developed an affinity for it. I like to represent people, and I like to litigate. I like to argue. I like to do public speaking, and I like to offer myself as a servant. And I just end up growing up loving shows like Law and Order, The Practice, Matlock, Perry Mason, To
Awesome.
Kill a
Awesome.
Mockingbird was my favorite movie.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and that's kind of where it started, and it blossomed, and I've been able to do relatively well.
Awesome. What are the top three types of crimes you understand as making the most impact in your community, and how do you plan to address these things in your area, in those
Okay,
areas?
and yeah, one of the things that we see in this area is despite us being a rural area
Hmm.
and our population not being as big as what we have in some of the larger places, we see the same crimes. We think that we have a larger proportion of violent crimes in this area than we should. The murder rates are really high for places that have our population size. There are a lot of property crimes,
Hmm.
too many to my liking. And then there are quite a few sexual crimes, offenses where underage children are being introduced into the sex
Absolutely.
life
Mhm.
far too often. And that's what I would say that our three major problems are. We can talk about drugs in every community, but some of the things that I think are really plaguing us that are kind of anomalies for towns as small as ours are the murder rates, the theft rates, and the sexual crimes. And one of the things I want to prioritize is that we attack those cases with a vengeance and with a passion, and start making sure that we let the people know that justice will be brought in those cases, and it will be brought swiftly.
Okay. If elected, Attorney Turner, what are you going to commit to the citizens of Selma that you're going to tackle first if you are elected?
One of the things that I want to commit to doing in Selma, since this question is specific to Selma, is diving into the backlog of cases that we have, particularly the violent crimes. Um,
Hmm.
we have some cases that are old. And when I say old, if a case has a case number of 2015, chances are that case may have even began in 2014 and it just came through grand jury in 2015. Those are cases where we're now in 2022 and they still haven't been resolved. So I definitely want to get in. If I get into the office, I want to get into those files and see what's taking these cases so long to settle. In
Okay.
addition to that, what I think Selma needs, and the remaining, the other counties as well, the other cities that are in our circuit as well, in addition to jumping in and handling those old cases,
Hmm.
we need to start handling some of the new cases too. For example, if a murder is committed in March, we want to put some of these cases on the fast track so that people can understand that the old way of just letting cases sit around and witnesses
Yes,
disappearing,
absolutely. Hmm.
that's going to be out of the window. We're going to do whatever we can and working with law enforcement to get these cases brought to court and having a resolution sooner rather than later.
Awesome. That said, Attorney Turner, I'm going to pivot a little bit. We have some questions to come in from the citizens. And one of the questions was, how does your faith inform your ideas of justice, specifically for felons and violent crimes?
Okay, how does my faith form
Inform your
inform?
ideas of justice specifically for felonies and violent crimes.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I am a person of faith. Um, I'm a minister, um, but when it comes to my faith and how it will influence my stance on violent crimes, you don't have to be a person that's well versed in Scripture to know that one of the Ten Commandments is, if you don't know any others, you should know thou shalt not kill. And
Absolutely.
that's not something that I came up with. That's not something
Mhm.
that any Alabama lawmaker came up with. Any person of faith knows that that's what the word says.
It does.
It says, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's ass."
Hmm.
These are covenants that do not compromise my faith. If I'm elected as the district attorney, one of the main things that I want to do is to make sure that we are tough on violent crime and that we make sure that people who commit crimes um, that involve the taking of a person's life that God did not give to you to take,
Uh-huh.
um, that those persons receive proper, swift punishment. My biggest thing is once we identify the person that has been accused of the crime, it's our job to make sure that the victim's family and the community as a whole have their interests considered and that they are engaged um, and informed every step of the process. But we definitely intend to make it a priority to make sure that God's commandment that thou shalt not kill is
Hmm.
one that people come to learn and respect in Selma, in Bibb County, in Hale County, in Wilcox, um, you know, as well as Dallas and Perry.
Absolutely. Now, are you familiar with the concept of restorative justice? And if so, how do you see it in action in your practices?
Yeah. When we speak of restorative justice, a lot of people conceptually talk about bringing the community together whenever there's been a crime committed. You bring the community together, the victims, the the person that has been accused, the people that are involved in the judicial system, and it typically requires that a resolution or some form of discussion ensues to where people leave the situation better than they enter into the situation. Now, restorative justice, in a sense, has a place in our current system.
Okay.
In our criminal justice system, one of the things that happens when a person is accused of a crime, that person has a right to an attorney and they have a right to plead not guilty. They have a right to plead guilty. They have a right to plead not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect or what have you. But on the other side of the coin, the district attorney has the obligation to defend and prosecute people who have offended the laws of the state of Alabama. The district attorney has an obligation to represent the interest of the people who have been affected by crime. How restorative justice can work in our existing system is if the district attorney talks with his clients and and discusses with them the possible punishments for the oppressor, I mean for the person who committed the crime,
Uh-huh.
and you get their input as to what do you want to see happen in this case, what do you want to see happen to this person, how has this affected your family, and what can we do um, that would satisfy you as far as how this case is handled. In some instances, I would anticipate that there are families that would say, and not necessarily in a murder case, but let's say it's a property case. There are some people that might say, well, he stole my lawnmower. I saw him. Now I know that that person looks like they had a substance abuse problem or what have you, or they were stealing because they had been laid off and they were trying to feed their family. I just want them to pay me back the price of my lawnmower, and I want them to get some help. In that simple scenario, restorative justice can come into play because once we know that this is a client that acknowledges that they were a victim of crime, but after
Hmm.
they've had an opportunity to familiarize themselves with the circumstances of the person who committed the crime, they don't want an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth. They want that person to be helped and they want their money back. In that situation, restorative justice has worked, and it was put into place in our existing system, and we offer a plea offer, and that handles it. It doesn't work like that all the time. I don't see restorative justice as being something that can be fully implemented the way that the people who are really pushing this agenda are pushing it, because there have been some serious crimes, and there are some
Yes,
people
there
charged with
have
some
been.
serious offenses. And
Yes.
I don't think it's fair to go to any family who has lost a loved one to gun violence, strangulation, uh, knives, knife injuries or what have you. Any person has had a family member killed. I don't think that it is the position of the state of Alabama or its representatives to try to talk or to coerce them outside of something that they feel on their inside. If it's a passionate case, I don't think that's the time to say, well, let's tell you about the person who killed your loved one. And, he's a college graduate and he's got a job and a family and all of that. That's something that they're not going to want to hear. And that's something that this office just will not push upon anybody. So restorative justice has its place. And there are places where I definitely see that it has a benefit, but there are some places where I don't think that there's much room for it to be put into place in some cases.
Okay. Studies have proven that white and black people use and sell drugs at about the same rate, and yet Black people are more likely to be arrested and prosecuted for selling and possessing drugs. How will they be prosecuted for selling and possessing drugs? How will you ensure that Black and poor communities are not disproportionately policed and prosecuted?
Prosecutors have what's known as prosecutorial discretion, which means that if I'm elected as district attorney, myself and the associate district attorneys would have an opportunity to look at individual cases as they are brought to our attention. You
Mhm.
have to understand that the district attorney's office does not have arrest powers. So what you have is cases are made by your local law enforcement officers, which would
Mhm.
be your city police or your sheriff's departments or your state troopers or any other special task force
Yes,
that have been
yes.
put in place. So they make the arrest and the cases are brought to us for prosecution. Now, one thing that we need to talk about here is some arguments are national and some arguments are local.
Absolutely.
In this circuit, the Fourth Judicial Circuit of Alabama, with the exception of Bibb, you are going to have a larger number of persons arrested for drug cases because of the demographics. These areas are predominantly black. So the minority is actually a majority in the black belt. So you are going to have some numbers that are skewed. But my position is we plan to prosecute people who offend the law the same way, regardless of what their ethnic background is and regardless of their skin pigmentation. If you commit the crime, our intention and our objective will be to treat all people the same, victims as well as offenders. And that's my answer on that. There are some people that'll look at it and say, why are all our black boys, being locked up for murder or locked up for drugs in Selma or in Marion? Well, a lot of the victims are black too. And when you look at the numbers, if you are the majority, then more than likely the numbers are going to reflect, especially in the area where the Fourth Judicial Circuit where I'm running,
Yes.
those numbers are probably unlikely to change because there will be a larger proportion. But for the people that come in front of us, we're gonna treat them the same. You're gonna get prosecuted. Uh, your case will be dealt with regardless of your skin color.
Awesome. Um, Attorney Turner, that said, a question that I would like to impose on you is, what if someone, they are a first time offender, since we're on the black and white thing,
Okay.
um, how are you going to handle, because when I've read myself, it seems like we give more harsher sentences for drugs than we do murder. How are you going to handle those situations in your district?
I personally have not had a person that received a harsher sentence in a drug case than a murder. I can say this: if I'm elected, that will not be the case.
That will not be the
Won't
case.
be that will not be the case. Um, we definitely want to make sure, and I think we covered that in a question earlier,
Hmm.
that these violent crimes have to be dealt with. I am not a savior. No district
Hmm.
attorney candidate or current district attorney will be a savior. Murders have happened, and we want to go back to faith. Murders have been around since the first four people on earth, if you believe in the
Absolutely,
Bible,
they
you
have.
know, and it hadn't stopped since. This is 2022, and even before Jesus Christ even came,
Uh-huh.
murders have not stopped. But what we
Absolutely.
want to do and what we plan to do is to make sure that justice is even-handed across the board and fairly administered. Your question dealt with first-time offenders.
Yes.
First-time offenders, if it's a property crime, if it's a drug crime, um, have certain programs that are available to them. There are pretrial diversion programs
Okay.
already in place.
Yes.
There are
Uh-huh.
drug court programs that are already in place. What we need and what I plan to bring and work hard at establishing is a mental health court.
Absolutely.
The Fourth Judicial Circuit does not have that.
We
And if
need
it
it.
is, and if they do, it hasn't been uh, rolled out yet. It hasn't been presented and fully implemented for all citizens. We
Yes,
want
sir.
all people, regardless of their race, their economic wherewithal, for lack of
Hmm.
a better term, to have access, if they are a first offender, to pretrial diversion programs and to drug court programs, and hopefully mental health and veterans courts. But if it's your
Okay.
first time, but now if your first offense is rape, if your first offense is murder, don't come to me with,
Absolutely. Yes.
but it's my first time. Yeah, but you went too big. Your first time you went too big. So
Absolutely.
we can't allow you to get an opportunity for that second time.
So, Attorney Turner, are you planning to put any type of rehabilitation for those offenders that may have misdemeanors or whatever, to where they can go back into the community, but not just be locked up? Do
Yeah,
you
well,
have anything
those,
for that?
yeah, the programs that we
Hmm.
mentioned, the pretrial diversion that tries to catch people who are nonviolent offenders,
Yes.
who may have committed property crimes, such as theft, receiving stolen property, forgery, stuff like that. The drug court catches people who not only have been arrested for drug offenses, but there
Hmm.
might have been some other smaller offenses that they committed while under the influence of an addiction. The drug
Yes.
court program catches those, and those programs are designed to rehabilitate. The functioning mental health courts in
Yes.
America would be designed to rehabilitate and take people who they didn't form the necessary criminal intent necessary to convict them
Absolutely.
of a crime, but they were
Yes.
operating under a mental disease or defect that contributed to their actions. Those programs would be designed to rehabilitate. But the real answer to this is the rehabilitation is not the job of the district attorney.
Hmm.
If we allow people to go into those programs that fit those qualifications, we represent the victims. The defendants have their own lawyers. If you've been charged with a crime, it's your job, your lawyer's job, to do the best thing he can for you. The district attorney's office takes these things into consideration, and if we find out you can qualify for one of our pretrial programs or something like that,
Hmm.
that's fine. But rehabilitation, you're in the Department of Corrections. In the Department of Corrections and the sheriff, they'll handle what needs to be done to you from there if a person has to be incarcerated. But the policy has to be, we're going to help you out on the front end. If you don't qualify for those programs, we're serving our victims in the Department of Corrections. Um, Hopefully, the people that run that arm of the state will do a better job of rehabilitating folk. But as the DA, I can't do much rehabilitation. I can't talk directly to the person who was charged with the crime. That's work for somebody else to handle.
Okay. We're going to pivot again. This is a very good question that I've just been waiting to ask. What policies, practices, trainings are you going to have in place for officers to effectively communicate with the residents?
Okay. Now, good question. Here's the answer. I'm running for district attorney. Now, the district attorney has a lot of power, but the district attorney is not the police chief of your city.
Hmm.
He is not the sheriff of your city. Those two people, those offices, really have the responsibility of training the officers. Now, we will work hand in hand and in conjunction with one another in the cases that are brought. We will work hand in hand because I'm going to review the police reports. I'm going to review the evidence that's been collected, me and my staff, not just me. I'm not going to be Superman now. But what I will be able to do is, as we prepare these cases for presentation in front of judges and
Yes.
in front of juries, we will make sure that we prepare law enforcement officers as to how their testimony needs to be presented. We need to make sure that they are doing their job in an ethical manner. We're going to
Hmm.
send a message that we are not going to present cases where it appears as if rules were broken and criminal procedure was not followed. Um,
Yes.
we're going to make sure that notes are properly taken so that we don't have officers that come unprepared to withstand cross-examination from defense
Hmm.
attorneys. And we're going to be there to make sure that we prepare our witnesses. The law doesn't prevent you from preparing your witnesses when they get ready to go to trial. And the law does not prohibit us from, in the event that an officer prepares a case that wasn't quite up to the standard that was needed to necessitate a conviction,
Yes.
I'm going to have an open door policy and be willing to work with officers and law enforcement on what you did wrong and what we need to improve upon next time. So iron sharpens iron. A strong
Absolutely.
district attorney's office working with a strong sheriff and a strong police chief and well-trained officers that are willing to listen and to follow the rules of law in enforcing the law will make for a much better community. And I think when people start to see that, I'm not a finger pointer. So I'm not going to throw law enforcement under the bus and the judges under the bus. I'm going to do it, take what we have, build upon it, and then try to forge it into something that makes people proud to be a citizen of these places as opposed to leaving because of the crime rates.
If elected, Attorney Turner, how are you going to gain the trust of the residents with the temperature of the world today? It's very hard for a lot of residents to trust, uh, cop brutalities and all this other things. How are you going to gain the trust of the community if elected, Attorney Turner?
Yeah, I want to be a visible, working, um, community involved district attorney. Um, you'll see me in the courtrooms. Families that have been victimized by crimes will hear from me. And I pride myself in being professional and courteous and considerate, a good communicator, a good problem solver. And I believe that once the people are exposed to the way that I plan to run the office and they see it and understand that that's how I operate in my everyday life, my personal life, my faith life, that
Yes.
they'll begin to gain confidence. Now, the realistic part of life, though, is you will not gain the faith of all the people. I don't care who you are, because some people don't have faith in anything or anybody. But it will be my goal through hard work, through um, transparency and open communication,
Awesome.
that the majority of people who are of faith and who use faith will
Mhm.
begin to put some faith into this office.
If elected, Attorney Turner, do you believe law enforcement leaders understand their officers' treatment of the community residents? And how might this understanding, lack of understanding, contribute to street justice retaliation?
Now, that's a good question. I really believe when we talk about, if you ask the average person, what is the biggest problem in your community, they'll say violent crime. What we want to do from this office is employ investigators that work with the DA's office that will work in conjunction with existing law enforcement officers to try to figure out behind every violent crime what was behind it and what caused it. I
Mhm.
think too often, if you turn on your news tonight, and I think I heard them say that you live in Montgomery,
I do.
nearly every major news outlet lead story on their 5, 6, 9, and 10 o'clock news revolves around a murder. And what we normally get is a young black male or somebody was gunned down on ABC Street. The police have arrested 32-year-old John Doe and charged him with the murder. And that's what they give us. And everybody gets depressed and starts shaking their head. And they say, this has to stop.
Mhm.
What we aren't told is that in some of these cases, the shooter may have been making police reports 3 or 4 times before this actual shooting, saying that the dead person had attempted to shoot him before, and that this was an ongoing dispute. He just connected with his bullet while the other people were missing when they were trying to shoot at him. Now, I present that story because when you think about the question that you asked,
Uh-huh.
as the district attorney, it is important if we want to decrease these crime rates, we have to do more than just lock up people. We have to lock up the right people. And we have to figure out what was the backstory. The news lead doesn't give us the backstory. And until we start finding out the backstory and making sure that we're getting all of the shooters off the street and not just the one that everybody saw, we've got to get behind these things. Most of these crimes, the victim and the perpetrator know each other. Small percentage of these are random shootings. And what we have to do with this office and what I plan on doing is making sure we try to get as many of them off the street as possible. Not just one, so that we can go on the news and say we got a gunslinger or a thug off the street. We need to make sure that we're getting him, his cousin, and the other people that were involved. And you can only do that if we start digging into these backstories.
Thank you so much for that answer. If elected, since the DA is responsible for ensuring the grand jury monitors the conditions of the jail, what is your plan, if elected, to ensure that the jail conditions are safe and inhabitable for inmates?
Good question, but that's going to be a great question for the sheriff candidates, the probate judge, and the county commissioners.
Okay.
My only responsibility is to make sure that the people that need to be in the jail are
Stay
in there. And the ones that are in there awaiting a trial, that I get them to trial as soon as possible. And that's really my answer. The district attorney's office has no obligation. They have no power to make sure that the jail is in good condition or in bad condition. We're responsible for making sure that the ones who deserve to be in there are there, and the ones that don't deserve to be in there
Understood.
are
Understood.
released. But I don't plan on getting involved in that aspect of the legal system.
All right. All right. What role, if any, Attorney Turner, do you believe the grand jury should play in ensuring inmates get mental health and addiction evaluations?
The grand jury does not have a real say in that. The grand jury is comprised of 18 citizens
Hmm.
that are selected randomly from a jury pool that has been subpoenaed to court for jury duty. And what
Okay.
happens when the grand jury comes is cases are presented to them so that we can get an idea from them as to whether or not the person that's been accused with the crime should be indicted or not. The grand jury does not make determinations as to a person's mental health or their competency to stand trial, or
Okay.
any of those things. Um, the mental health court, if we can get that with proper medical documentation, um, hopefully we'll be able to catch those issues. But the issue of a defendant's competency is
Uh-huh.
something that is reserved for the judge that is hearing the case. And in some instances, it's not the grand jury that makes that decision, but a pettit jury, PETIT. That's the jury that's
Okay.
comprised of 12
Absolutely.
individuals. If a defense attorney requests that a competency hearing be held by jury trial, and he makes that request promptly, then a jury can make a determination as to whether they think the person was competent at the time of the commission of the crime and whether or not they are competent to stand trial. But the grand jury, and I know I'm being technical, but you wouldn't want to
No,
interview a
no.
lawyer that was
This
speeding
this is
in
what we
Los
want.
Angeles. patient. That's
This
right.
is exactly what we want to hear from
That's right.
you. Um, you hear me saying, if elected,
That's
and I'm
right.
going to ask the next question. If elected, what is your vision for our criminal justice system to ensure that it is just for all? What else? What do you see is working well in the legal system, and what changes will you make if elected?
Yeah, one of the things that I want to do, the job of a prosecutor never changes. You know, you can't come in. I'm not running for president. I'm not running for governor. You know, I can't come in and practice like, oh man, we're gonna have, we all gonna dress alike, this and that. We gonna make court fun. This is not a fun job. This
Mhm.
is a serious job. I don't make the law, but I will be responsible for making sure that lawbreakers are brought to justice and given a fair opportunity to defend themselves.
Mhm.
Victims of crimes deserve to have their cries heard, their wishes heard. My job is to work for those victims as hard as I can to make sure we get the right person who offended them and that the punishment fits the crime. Those are, my primary goals. Those are my objectives for the office. I want to have people that are competent assistants, colleagues, and workers. I want to have a well-trained staff. I want us to be able to copy, scan, utilize computers and all of the latest technology that there is to make our job more efficient. But my main objective is to speed up the way cases are handled in our circuit, and the district attorney's office is ready as soon as possible to give people a trial or to give them an offer if the victim says yes, so that our system can operate at optimum efficiency. It's too slow. I know I talk a lot. It's too slow.
No,
It
no,
takes too
no.
long, and we
This is
don't
the
give.
feedback that we're looking for.
That's right. We're gonna speed this thing up. We got to speed it up. You know, once
So,
we think
with
we got
that
the
being
right person, go ahead. Go ahead.
say that again. Okay, so with that being said, what processes and procedures would you put in place if elected immediately once you get into office? If elected,
All right.
what processes
Yeah.
and procedures would you put in place?
One of the first things that we want to do is utilize the resources that are available, like district attorneys' offices, as well as police forces, sheriff's departments. One of the things that we have at our disposal is if a person is arrested, we can do a quick background check on this offender or this accused person to find out what their prior history looks like. That's important. The reason why that's important is because the first thing that happens in a case is, and a lot of people have been discussing this about high bonds and no
Yes,
bonds and all this type of
absolutely.
stuff.
Hmm.
But we want to be prepared when we're going to use the resources so that when a person is arrested, we know who it is.
Hmm.
And if it's a person, we want to be prepared as soon as we come to court the first time the judge has us in court at a bond hearing. We want to be able to say, Judge, this is his first offense. But we also want to be able to say, in some instances, Judge, this is the fifth time this man been accused of stealing. We understand that they want the bond to be set at the minimum, but it looks like this person just can't stop stealing. We want to be able to say, Judge, we have researched this defendant and we suggest that his bond be set at the max because this is the third time. We understand he is only accused of murder, but Judge, this is the third time he's been accused of killing somebody. We don't believe that he needs to have a low bond. We don't believe he needs to be out on the street. That's one of the first things we want to implement:
Hmm.
readiness and familiarity with the people who are in the
Hmm.
courtroom at an early stage. The second priority is to make sure that we have a relationship with law enforcement to let them know when court is coming up. We don't want officers coming into the courtroom without their file. We don't want officers coming in the courtroom saying, I didn't know court was today. and then getting on the stand and thinking that it's okay to say, can I get back with you on that? We want to make sure that everybody knows that court is serious business. Time is money. Time is precious. And if we want
Mhm.
to attack this backlog of cases, everybody needs to be ready, 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 ready. I'm
Ready.
going to stand up for a minute.
Absolutely.
Look,
Mhm.
look, I'm going to stand up for a minute. What I have at the bottom on my backdrop, it says ready, resourceful, and resilient.
And resilient. I see it. Yes, sir. I see it.
So we want to be ready the district attorney's office wants to be ready. Whatever y'all want to do, we ready for it. If y'all not ready, we ready, and that's what we plan on bringing. That's what my focus is. Let's
That's
bring
number
some
two.
energy. That's number
That's
two.
number two. Now,
Yeah.
what's the third?
The third is the
Yes.
technology aspect of it. From technology aspect of it, we need a functioning um, law practice management software
Absolutely.
running through the district attorney's office. There are many available. One of the first things I would do is to make sure that we get something that we can afford within the budget. But what it does is it allows district attorneys to take notes in their cases, keep track of all of our victims and the victims' family members, all of the witnesses, so that we don't lose witnesses as we go along the case process. Keep all of the family members and the victims informed of their court dates. And then what it also does is we upload documents that are in exhibits,
Mhm.
evidence that comes forth in the case. If it's
Yes.
all kept in one central database, if one of my assistant district attorneys catches the flu or the dreaded C word and they
Yes.
can't appear to court, we
Absolutely.
don't have
Yes.
to continue cases just because there is an attorney that is not present. Another attorney will be able to go into this file, and district attorneys' offices all across the nation use this type of software. We don't. I want to do that, and I plan on doing that so that things can move along without a hiccup, and we can go forward with these preliminary hearings, first calls, um, pre-trial conferences, and we won't be able to miss a beat. In order to get your stuff continued and all of that, all of us will have to be sick at the same time. But if we've
Yes.
got one or two that are around, that technology that's available will allow us to always be what? Be ready.
We'll be ready. Okay. I have two more questions for you, Attorney Turner. This question is, what are your thoughts on the current bail system? And what, if any, changes would you like to see in how the bail system works in the community? I think he froze. Attorney Turner? I think we're having a little technical difficulties, but just hang in there. We'll be right back so he can answer that question. We want to thank Attorney Turner for chiming in and listening to some of the questions. And I guess Lydia is working on getting us back connected. Um, those were some great answers that were given from candidate Attorney Turner for District 4. They're having a little technical difficulties, but I guess we're going to get it back up. Hold on. Sorry about that, Attorney Turner. With all of this Wi-Fi and all of this broadband problems we're having, I really wanted you to answer that last question. So I'm going to ask you again before we, end the broadcast. What are your thoughts on the current bail system? And what, if any, changes would you like to see in how the bail system work in our community?
One of the things that I want to do is, and I think we kind of got into this a little bit earlier
Mhm.
when I
We
talked
did.
about,
We
yeah,
did.
what people need to understand about bail, the purpose of bail is to make sure that the defendants show up for court.
Yes.
That's the purpose of it. It's not meant to punish people before they commit, after they've committed a crime. Alabama has bond ranges and recommended ranges. The only case that you can pick up where you don't have the right to have a bond set in your case is capital murder.
Yes.
For a murder, which is a Class A felony, and any other Class A felony, you're looking at a situation where typically the cap is $150,000 at the bond. Judges have within their discretion to go above that range
Mhm.
in certain circumstances. Under the current bail system, it's your duty as a prosecutor to try to make sure that you keep the community safe, and that
Yes.
you sometimes keep the defendant safe, because there are sometimes certain information about cases where if this guy makes bond, there are already people threatening to kill him if he gets out, you know. And in those instances, sometimes you need to set a bond higher just to ensure that that person is safe as well as the community. Now, the
Absolutely.
current bond bail system, the only problem that I have with it is sometimes when we utilize what's called cash bonds.
Uh-huh.
Cash bonds disproportionately affect people who lack what? Cash.
Absolutely.
So sometimes what we'll have is that people will be held not necessarily because they are the worst person in the world, but they just don't have access to funds that some affluent offender might have. So I believe that there needs to be some attention given to revamping the bail system to where it has it functions and it does not punish poorer people than it does people who aren't poor. That's my problem. I
Yes.
don't have a problem with high bonds or
Mm-hmm.
no bonds in
Mm-hmm.
capital cases, murder cases, rape cases, or people that are serial criminals, because
Mm-hmm.
they have shown that when they're out, we're all in danger. So
Yes.
from that respect, there are situations that do require high bonds. I don't care what anybody says.
Mm-hmm.
Because if a person, just like as a kid, if you have not proven that you know how to act, then certain privileges need to be taken
Taken
away.
away.
Yes. But
It
we
just
do need to start addressing situations where people have bonds that have been set
mm-hmm.
and they are nonviolent offenders,
Mm-hmm.
or they may be drug offenders. And the only reason they are sitting in jail is because they have nobody that owns property in their family, or
Mm-hmm.
they don't have enough money to afford a bail. Like,
Yes. Yes.
typically if a bond is $50,000, most bondsmen are going to require the family to come up with 10% of that to pay him in order to go
Mhm.
on the bond. Some
Yes.
operate on 7.5. Some have begun to make payment plans. But I don't have $5,000 just sitting around my house right now to pay if my son gets into some trouble.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Other people might be able to do that at the drop of a dime.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to look at situations where people are sitting there and they may not be violent, they may not be, a danger to the community, but they're just sitting there. We need to figure out ways to where we can, get them out in those narrow circumstances. But for the big ones, the big boys,
Mm-hmm.
I have no problem with a bond set high. The Bible says what? The 10 Commandments, thou shalt not
Not.
kill. Huh?
Thou should not kill.
Yeah.
We are short for time. I got to get this last question into you, Attorney Turner. What commitments are you willing to make on your role in serving our community, regardless of the election outcome?
I plan to continue being visible. I coach Little League Baseball. As soon as I get off this call, I'm changing clothes to go coach them 11 and 12-year-olds.
Gotcha.
Been doing it my whole life. I plan on continuing to go out and visit the schools and educate the children, talking to athletes, about statutory rape and how easy it is to get into it and how hard it is to get out of it. I plan to continue to practice law in some respect and in some regard, regardless of the outcome in this case. I plan to continue to be friendly and meet people and talk to them about their situations, to be active in, fraternity life, my college life, be involved in my high school alma mater. I went to my high school alma mater's graduation last night, so I just plan on continuing spending time with my family. I got 2 great kids, a beautiful wife, and I plan to do that. I enjoy life, and I want people to feel safe in this community. I want us to take pride in it. And whether I win or whether I lose, you're still going to see me around. I might not be coming just knocking on your house and introducing myself to you, that you have to do in the campaign. But I plan on still being me, and offering myself a service and, doing what I do and what I've always done.
Well, I want to personally thank you, Attorney Robert Turner, for taking out the time to come and answer these questions that were sent in from the community. It has been a pleasure, and I hope that you enjoyed the remainder of your day, and good luck to you.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you to this organization. I don't know who all is a part of it, but it seems like you all are doing a great job. I like the name that's been chosen for it. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the people, because
Absolutely.
I believe that voters need to meet us and they need to hear our platforms.
Yes.
Um,
Very important.
signs don't vote, people do. And every chance I get to talk to the people, I try to take advantage of it so that you can know as much about me before Tuesday as you possibly can. I
Thank
have
you
nothing.
again.
Thanks.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.